Apologies, but before I do that, there is the protocol to read out as members of the public can be in attendance. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Kilmancraigs. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today, so if the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. The council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilmancraig staff report to their floor's assembly points. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised it is safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure that access routes are kept clear for the emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will also be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing after the meeting. Otherwise, the taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings are not permitted during a meeting unless with the express permission of the chair. The members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video. All attendees mute their microphones when not speaking. Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak on any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hand and I will bring you in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, please indicate now. No such notice. I will now ask the clerk to confirm attendance at this planning committee and check on apologies, and I would ask that members indicate following that if they wish to declare an interest.
We have apologies from Councillor Fairley and Councillor Quinn.
So, not heard from Councillor.
Oh, Councillor is on.
He's online. Ah, good, right. Sorry, Mark, I had you absent there. Apologies for that. Okay, declarations of interest. Has anyone any declaration to declare? The narratives on the agenda page. No, that's fine. We'll crack on. Item 3, confirming the minutes of the meeting held in this paper on 12th of March at 9:30. In the usual way, we'll go through the lines, the pages rather, and you just raise your hand if there are any errors, omissions, or any alterations need to be made. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. No hands raised, so we will presume those minutes are adopted. Item 3B on the agenda is the meeting that took the meeting of the local review body held in the council chamber on Thursday, the 12th of March at 11:55. Similarly, each page 9 and page 10. No amendments, no omissions. That's fine. We'll proceed having adopted those to item 4, the application 25-00194 MSC for matters specified in conditions for 248 new houses, including the details, etc. Phases 3 and 4 of the development. This is going to be given to us by Martin Mott. This is his first presentation to the committee, so welcome on board for that regard. Over to you now, Mark. Red lights. Somebody's got theirs on.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This application reference number 23.
Sit back a wee bit from the lights. Too near to it.
This is application reference number 25. Forward slash 0.
It's a duct mic. So you change that over.
Bill Norman.
Cease and desist for the moment. Great, you mic.
Not any better?
That's much better.
Terrific. The old joke microphone trick.
Yes.
Thank you. This is application reference number 25//00194 MSC, which is for the erection of phases 3 and 4 of the Brands Hill housing development. The proposal is a matters specified in condition application for the construction of 248 houses with associated roads, footpaths, landscaping and drainage works. The recommendation to committee is to approve the scheme subject to the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. The application relates to phases 3 and 4 of a residential development of up to 1,000 houses, which was granted planning permission in principle in 2023, reference 10/00153 PPP. For context, the overall phasing plan for the Brands Hill development looks like that. Now, it's not easy to see at that scale, I appreciate. So for clarity, that is phase 3, which will be to the west of the houses which are currently under construction. And phase 4 is for the northwest corner of the site. It should be noted that planning permission in principle is already in place. The effect of this is that the principle of housing development on the site is not for consideration as part of this application, only the conditions on the PPP itself. To address the conditions on the PPP, it should be noted that conditions 1, 2 and 8 are compliance conditions which do not require a separate MSC, and these are not for consideration today. Moving on to condition 3, siting, design and external appearance of houses, etc. The updated transport assessment has been submitted as required. The existing tree protection and planting specifications on the planning permission in principle are not necessarily relevant to these 2 phases. However, the suggested condition 7 will protect the existing trees during construction works. The existing approved master plan only gives a framework for areas of open space and play areas. This proposal will secure details of play areas and open space through suggested condition 6. In terms of house type, 12 different house types are proposed. The mixture of detached and semi-detached houses. The houses will be consistent in height, but will feature a mixture of finishes and details to add interest to the character of the area. They will feature a mix of terracotta roofs with white rough cast walls and grey roofs with buff rough cast. All houses will feature buff-coloured base courses, and interest will be added by different house models having different detailing on principal elevations. The houses themselves will be a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom models. Condition 4 relates to site layout, etc. I'll show you some photos to show similar houses by the same builder which are under construction in the earlier phases of the site, which were taken last week. So this is to the southwest of where the current phases will go. Got some construction work in the background there. Hopefully that gives a flavour for the different palette of materials that are being used here. The houses will connect to existing public utilities and energy infrastructure. Road surfaces will reflect the design principles in the approved master plan to provide uniformity of design across the whole site. Domestic and visitor car parking will be provided, and a photograph here shows the main entrance to the site from Brands Hill Road. A master plan has previously been approved for the wider development site, and this scheme derives from that. As the master plan covers the whole site, and not just these phases, the resolution is a little unclear. Let me bring up the approved master plan. As I say, it's quite a small scale there, but for clarity, the red line indicates the site boundary. Primary, secondary, and tertiary routes are identified by different colours. Suds are shown in blue, pocket parks in green, equipped play areas are marked by red asterisks, and the mugga is a brown rectangle approximately 1/3 of the way up from the bottom and towards the centre line of the site. Details of the relevant site history are included in the report. There should be no need to go into those details today, as none of it's particularly relevant to these phases. According to the approved master plan, Play facilities are to be provided to a level that's considered to be acceptable for the development as a whole. But for clarity, it should be noted that the mugger shown on that drawing is not within either of these two phases. In terms of condition 5, flood risk and drainage, etc., neither SEPA nor Scottish Water have offered any objection to the proposal. In terms of landscaping, it's considered that the development will be enhanced by the proposed tree, hedge, and planting provision. A landscape plan has been submitted, which again, I realise is quite a small scale, not necessarily conducive to being read, but for clarity, the plan shows areas of maintained grass, meadowland, water, individual trees, woodland, and hedges. It should be noted that there are no statutorily protected trees within the site, no TPOs, no conservation area. The granted planning permission includes a suggested condition to provide tree protection measures while the development works are taking place, which is fairly standard. But it should be noted that is not a de facto tree preservation order. It's only protection measures for existing trees during construction work. More detailed landscaping information has been provided. The following drawings show areas of proposed tree planting, shrub planting, hedge planting, grass and hard surfaces across the two phases. Specific species have been identified for particular sites. Would be provided with a list of appropriate native species. So I won't dwell too long on these, but these are the submitted. There are 6 of these just covering the whole site to show tree planting, hedge planting, trees growing within the curtilage of houses, etc. So that's the northwest corner of the site. Green space in the middle. Northeast corner of the site. And as I say, these just show provision of trees within the curtilage of houses, for example, hedging areas, that sort of thing, tree belt along the western edge, underplanting of hedges along the western edge. And that's the final one, that's the southwest corner of this part of the development. So in conclusion, and with regard to the development plan, for the reasons given in the report, subject to the suggested conditions, we believe the application meets the requirements of the matter specified by condition for the planning permission in principle, and approval is recommended to committee with no material considerations to outweigh that recommendation.
Right, thank you, Mark. We'll move on to questions from members. Just as a sort of pointer, 3.24, I think is quite a good summary of what our mission is today, starting at the second sentence. The key considerations for this application are its compliance with the terms of the PPP and the Section 75 relevant provisions of the development plan, etc. So we've been down this road before with this kind of thing. It should be fairly straightforward, but we'll take any questions from members for Mark. Councillor Law.
I'm just wondering, just with the site plan that you were showing for in the northwest corner, I don't know,
Would you go back to it?
that one.
So
It's not on a payment.
it says at the end of the slide show, so we will. Mark.
Oh. There we go. Which one?
So see the one that kind of shows the north end of it. So
Oh.
yeah, so I take it the red bar, that's the site boundary. You've then got like a kind of hedgerow behind the back gardens. Who maintains that, and how can they maintain that if the site boundary is that red bit, which I'm guessing is a fence? they're not really going to be able to get in to maintain that. How does that get maintained, and why are the back gardens not taking up that whole area? To me, it just doesn't make sense. It's kind of a practical question, but I just think it just doesn't make sense.
I'm feeding back through my own machine here. Hang on a sec. I don't know why they haven't extended the gardens all the way to the top of the site. I can only imagine it might be because of the existing tree belt there. Perhaps they didn't want to. What tends to happen when you have high trees growing behind people's houses is it doesn't take long for them to start complaining about them either blocking their sunlight or being at risk of blowing over, and they start cutting them down. But it's not been explained to us why the gardens don't go all the way to the top of the site, other than could be that, or it could be a desire to provide a landscape buffer along there. Don't know. Jacob?
Yes, so this does happen a lot in developments. So if they're incorporated into the gardens, the likelihood is that they will be removed by people that move into those gardens. And we've got the climate and emergency and the biodiversity asks of NBF4, and essentially a lot of this is new plantings. So you've got your trees which are there already, but there will be new hedgerows planted. We won't be looking to adopt any of these areas. The likelihood is that they will be incorporated into the factors. So it will be up to the landowner, which may be a shared ownership arrangement here, to maintain those areas. But for biodiversity, keeping those areas and introducing new planting in those areas should hopefully be a benefit.
So are all the trees that are kind of on the driveways, is that front bit that is again not owned by the property owner but is maintained by the factor?
That's different. So no, those are in the front gardens of those properties, and there is a condition there that they need to be planted and they need to be retained there for a minimum of 5 years. Beyond that time, it then becomes the individual's responsibility to maintain those trees. They may choose to remove them.
So the developer has to maintain them for 5 years, and then it goes to the property, or the property owner has to maintain them for 5 years?
So the condition goes across the whole development. When you buy a property like this, you get told about the conditions which go with the development, so they will be aware. So at this point, it would be the developer's responsibility. At the point that the property owner, the person purchasing the property takes it on, they should be notified of their responsibilities to follow those conditions.
If they don't follow those conditions and put it out, what happens?
It then becomes enforceable. So we would initially send them a letter, ask them to replant the tree in accordance with the condition. And then we would look at what next steps are proportionate, appropriate in that circumstance.
A follow-up to that might be, what's the point of the 5-year period if at the end of that 5 years and a day they can rip the tree out? What do we achieve by that?
So there's lots of benefits from trees, and it's mainly to establish character. So when you put a tree in freshly planted, it could be a whip, it could be a little bit larger, but essentially it's for those people to get used to that tree being in the front garden. It also, in terms of the benefits, would act as a privacy screen. So it's there. Gardens in the front are less used. They don't tend to be areas that people sit out and maybe have the garden parties or whatever they have. So there's lots of benefits in terms of shading as well. So it might help with shading on hot days like today. I know they're few and far between. But yeah, it's just to establish that period and establish the character. And hopefully what will happen is we've got phases which are coming on board now where you can see the trees, so phases 1 and 2. But as we move forward, you will see these trees at different stages because obviously phase 1's being built now. Phase 3 and 4 is looking at completion dates in 2029 and 2034.
I'm going to bring in Lee Robertson at this point.
So I can just provide some clarity in terms of how the kind of developments work. So once the planning permission and everything's been granted, developers tend to put what's called a deed of conditions in place over the whole of the property, over the phases, and it deals with the common parts that you've been referring to in terms of the trees. It also deals with aspects of maintenance requirements. So there's almost a bit of two bites of the cherry. You've also got the planning side of things in terms of enforcement, but actually under the deed of conditions, there's enforcement by third parties, so your neighbours and everything. If you're not doing what you need to do under the title conditions of the property, then they've got the ability to enforce under that. So what they tend to do, most developers, as I said, they'll put a deed of conditions in place. The deed of conditions will impact every single owner of the property. And as Jacob has confirmed, 9 times out of 10, they tend to put a property factor in place who deals with the, maintenance requirements for any of the trees, the common parts that's deemed to be common parts. And the common parts are normally owned by all the owners of the development. So if you have 100 houses in a development, say phase 3, I don't know what the case is in this one, but then all the owners own those common parts. It's just the fact that it comes in and then maintains them in terms of the deed of conditions. I just thought I'd provide some clarity around the legal bit on that as well. But happy to ask any more questions.
Right, thanks very much for that. Mark, the blue dots, are they substantial trees as opposed to hedgerows? Is that that?
Yes, essentially. So it's hard to get a really good scale. It's hard to get a really good scale for a drawing, unfortunately. But yes, there will be different types of trees being put in, different sizes as well as species going in there.
And they represent high canopy jobs, do they?
Yes, but unfortunately, I can't, it's not that.
Blue dots are bird boxes.
Bird box.
The blue dots are bird boxes, yes. I'm trying to scroll in on this so you can actually see it a little better, but I'm not sure I can.
And the brown ones is insect hotels.
They're nice. Excellent.
Does
Thank
that
you.
make it any easier to, yeah, it does actually. Hang on.
Bird box, good. Glad I asked. Mark, looking at 3.57, it is just the wording. I'm a bit of a fussbot for these kind of things. Details of the finished floor levels of the properties also appear to be acceptable. And surely that should read are acceptable. 3.57.
Well, in my experience, it's something that doesn't appear to be too equivocal. So you will find planners using terminology like that a lot, just because if you say it is, somebody can come along and say it isn't. Because if you say it may be, well, it may be, and then it may not, but that's just perhaps a personal style as much as anything else.
But there's a more serious point, and it's the fact that it's a condition, and we should be approving the condition. We should be satisfied, should we not, that what should be done has been done, not that it appears to be.
We don't have a condition on finished floor levels, as far as I can tell, Jacob.
Yes, so this relates to a condition of the PPP. In terms of the finished floor levels, they're looking at level access for all front doors, so we would regard it as acceptable. Yeah, the language there is a bit woolly, I'd agree, but we are making a recommendation. We're not the decision maker, so we're saying to you, it appears to be acceptable. Do you agree?
Right, come on, log what, have a look.
But we're not the boots on the ground here.
No, you're not, and we're looking at plan, so we haven't actually seen something that's been built at this stage. So, in our professional opinion, it is acceptable.
Kindly say so.
Sorry.
Julie,
Councillor McTaggart.
Yeah,
Councillor, sorry, Jane.
Sorry.
think Councillor Errol was ahead of you.
Oh, you got
Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, it's on the questions on the trees. We talked a moment ago there about the height and the display of the trees. What about the roots? There've been quite a few developments where it looks like the roots have been an afterthought. And then pathways you've got coming up and down, it looks like a scale model of the Ochils in some places. What can we do to ensure the smooth travel for people that are going to be using these routes? I'm talking about people using wheelchairs, prams, etc. Is there anything we can do to ensure that the routes are going to be far enough down that it's not going to cause a problem there for getting by? Thank you.
Thank you. The landscaping has been done by a proper landscape. We have to assume it's been done by a proper landscape person, and that's been considered by them in terms of what species they're suggesting.
I'm sorry, I missed that bit.
Could you run that again, please, Mark, for Councillor Errol?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Picking up what Mark Dunlop is saying.
I can hear most of you, but I just can't hear the opposite.
The rest of you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The information that we've been given by a qualified person that they've given us in terms of the tree species, we kind of have to assume that they're appropriate for use in terms of being native species and in terms of their roots, because they will be going close to houses. But that's something that we partially have to trust the landscape consultant on. Really, I'm not sure it would be something that a planner, any random planner could necessarily say they were qualified to speak to, really. I think we would have to assume the species that have been chosen are not going to cause damage through outroot growth.
Okay, so it's just a concern I've got is someone who uses a motor vehicle type thing, a chair, and you're going up and over these things. It's not exactly the smoothest of journeys if you're going over the bumps all the time, and that could be negated by simply having a smoother surface. But as the officer said right enough, it's quite possibly not him that can answer that question. It would be up to the landscapers. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do.
Hi, Councillor. So they can be removed if there is a problem. So within the first 5 years, we're not expecting anything to become a problem. They've been located in areas where there's green space in the front garden, and the roots tend to go to areas where they can get water. The surfaces in the development are designed to be impermeable. So in theory, the roots should stay within the garden areas, although nature can take its own course.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to that last point, the 3.57, where it says appears to be, just on Councillor Coyne's point, what would happen if we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know what that's going to look like. So what happens if that condition is unmet in the future? I've got other questions, but I'll let you deal with that. Thanks.
I can answer that. So it would be covered in the building regulations as well. So building regs require it to have a level access to that front door.
Thank you.
Sorry, you've got the brush.
The Coal Authority, now it's mentioned quite a few times in the paper. How often are the Coal Authority consulted, and how often are inspections made Because the reason I ask is it's a very volatile landscape. I mean, it's like a honeycomb underneath that particular development. So it's just sure that there's no likelihood of an underground fire breaking out or a collapse of a old face or something like that. The other question I have is, can we have assurances that the traffic management plan, and I'm sick of hearing myself saying this, I'll be honest with you, the traffic management plan will be adhered to, that the previous conditions in place will be acknowledged. And I raise it specifically because obviously I'm getting complaints about it, but the corner of Fairfield Road and Parkhead Road, there's actually a sign that says construction traffic. It's pointing up in the direction towards Sunnyside Bay, which would then take you along Church Grove and along Branshill Road. That is not in the traffic management plan. There are also heavy vehicles still using Fairfield Road. Seen it myself, but I get regular updates with the people who they're telling me their windows are shaking and everything because of the amount of traffic that's gone up there. They're not supposed to be going up there. And obviously it takes it through an area where it's heavily developed already by housing. So there's a lot of footfall. I just worry that this additional development is going to increase the amount of construction traffic and therefore increase the amount of problems that we're getting with traffic management. So I'd like assurances that that is going to be properly managed and that this is going to stop. Thanks.
Thank you. In terms of the coal issue, the first question about coal issue, given the context here, we tend to consult the Coal Authority on the majority of planning applications of all types. In this particular case, the Coal Authority have come back and said that as long as the works are carried out in accordance with the submitted details, they don't anticipate any difficulty in terms of mining legacy. Generally speaking, we have to take that at face value, and that if they're largely satisfied and we can control this, which we can do, then we have to take that at face value. It's not necessarily ideal, but it seems to be the way that it goes. I mean, if we consult any consultee and they say we don't foresee any difficulties with this, then they're the experts, and that we would tend to take that at face value, but you can't cover every single eventuality.
Well, so obviously it's a moment in time. Things can change. Geology is not going to stay exactly the same forever and ever. So I'm wondering if potentially the Coal Authority would have to be consulted if there's a major shift, and even just a shift in direction of how the phases go, because some of it will be closer to the surface than others. Some of them will be phases, some of them will be shafts. So I just wonder if that's something that's likely to happen throughout the development.
I'll come in on that one. So the Coal Authority get consulted on each of the phases, so it isn't just one consultation that we're relying on, and they're more up to date in terms of the consent processes. So there's a separate consent process through the Coal Authority licenses and terms on those licenses. So if there was something new that cropped up, they'd have to report that back to the Coal Authority. They wouldn't be reporting it to the council per se. It would be the Coal Authority which would advise on the next steps. I think, unless you've got any more questions on that, or can maybe move on to the traffic management.
Traffic management, please.
And I'll probably take that one back. There's a representative of the developer in the room, so hopefully they've heard what you've said there. So the primary route is the roundabout that has been built. You've got the primary route as well, which runs through the centre of the site, and the traffic management plan is conditioned on the PPP, but also as the secondary of this MSC as well. In terms of the signage, we can look at that separately. So if it's pointing in the wrong direction or directing people to the wrong place, we can take that up with the developer. We can look at that under our enforcement processes as well. But in terms of it being adhered to, that then falls back to us in terms of our enforcement powers. So we've not had any complaints, I think, since the early part of this year. If something came forward, we would open it up and look at it again.
I have encouraged the people who are complaining to complain directly. Whether they've done that or not, I've actually got a meeting there tonight, so I'll speak to them again. But they're certainly complaining to me, which I'm passing on, obviously.
Yes. So in terms of the development phases, the ones that have been built now are directly next to people's properties. So you would expect that complaints would potentially rise at this point. But in terms of complaints to the service, we haven't received any since the early part of this year. And when we went out to check, that they weren't doing anything wrong. We were abiding by the traffic management plan at that time.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I've kind of five questions, but hopefully we'll be reasonably quick. So, in terms of the landscape master plan, the south boundary, particularly in the north, doesn't cover the woodland shelter belt, the existing one. So, is that safeguarded in any way in terms of during the construction period and moving forward in the future? I don't know if you want to answer that one first.
I can do so. It's outside of the red line boundaries, so the protections that we can offer those are almost non-existent. But there will be fencing erected along that line. So if the landowner decides to remove those trees, there's potentially nothing that we can do at this point. But all the trees that are within the red line boundary, which is some of them on that belt, are to be maintained through that condition.
Okay, and the second question is, in terms of all the houses that are on site, is there electricity vehicle charging points been put in all of those as standard?
Yeah, so in terms of building regs, we haven't received a warrant for this. We are stepping over slightly into building control matters, but so each of these properties will have an electrical vehicle charging point, will have solar panels, and they'll need to meet the new regs as well. So potentially won't have gas boilers as they do in current phases.
Okay, so you feel we don't need to condition that?
So I believe there's a condition on here about the air impact assessment, or the air quality assessment, sorry, which has recommendations that include things like electrical vehicle charging. So in terms of improving air quality, electric vehicles are seen to do that. So that is already in there, but it's packaged with the air quality stuff.
Okay. And bin storage, what provision has been made for bin storage in the homes?
Very good question. Mark, I don't know, have you got an answer for that about bin storage provision?
Not off the top of my head.
What would normally make it planning or building control?
It depends. So, I mean, bin storage tends on most people's properties just to be within the curtilage of the property. So, towards the back of the house, there might be purpose-built bin storage at the front. I haven't seen anything on this development which shows bin storage, so presumably it would be to the back of the house. And we've also walked through earlier phases, and we haven't come across any problems with regards to bin storage. So I don't think there's any purpose-built bin storage facilities, but yeah, it hasn't come to the front as a problem in other things, so we don't expect it to here.
But is it a planning consideration?
It is a planning consideration so far as is there enough space for people to store bins, and we do think that there is here. Then it comes down to individual management. So if it's stored in the wrong place or it's causing a nuisance, it falls to other teams to look at that. So if it was a nuisance, it'd be environmental health. If it was stored on the road, for example, it'd be the roads authority.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, for the records, I'd be grateful if you could record that it's my personal view as a councillor that we should be making a provision for bins as part of our standard conditions, but I'll move on.
Just before you do, I think Mark wants to come in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, generally speaking, specific bin storage would be more a thing that I would associate with development of flats rather than detached and semi-detached houses. Generally speaking, people keep their bins within their own cartilage. In that kind of situation, flats, yeah, not so much, but I do understand what you mean.
I hear what you're saying, Mark. As a local authority, we're increasing the number of our bins, and I know these are 3-bedroom homes, so they should have relatively large gardens. But I think as a standard procedure, we ought to be considering this as an issue for the future, and we should condition it. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. I'm just asking that be recorded in the minutes of planning. Moving on, in terms of the paper, there's a change to the core path. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and whether you feel that the gradients are appropriate?
Sorry, which paragraph are you referring to?
What was that? Sorry, Mark. Yeah.
I picked a terrible day to lose my voice.
Yeah, sorry. There's a change to the core path within the
Paragraph in the report.
Is that in these phases, councillor?
Yeah, it's specifically referenced in the report that there's, and our own transport team raised a concern, but not an objection, about the change to the core path. And I'm just wondering, it was primarily in relation to gradients, and I'd like to know whether, from the planning's professional opinion, whether that's been adequately addressed.
Somebody want to write it?
I'm trying to find it in the report.
8.85, I think, Donald.
Thanks, Jane. 3.85.
Oh, no, that's just to do.
That's public.
So, public art.
Mention it, so.
It's,
Can I come in, Chair?
Right. We'll get a contribution from.
3.6.
some of the stuff.
Yes, so just to make clear that this phase doesn't involve the core path. There are changes on the wider site. I'm not too sure where it's referenced. I'll have a little read through it and see where it comes out. But the public artwork which is over the whole development is to be installed along the core path. And there were changes to the core path and the gradient in earlier phases, which have already been decided. But on this phase, I think there's talk of footpaths and connectivity through the actual site itself, but not the core path. These are new footpaths.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Jacob. I knew myself it was far to the south, but given it was referenced in the report, I was seeking clarification on that, which you've given. Turning to the public art, is it possible, well, I suppose your response is going to be the same, that the public art strategy is a separate issue, is that right?
Yes, so the public art strategy has already been agreed. It's going to consist of steel panels which have got different patterns on them, and they're expected to be installed mid 2032. So a little while off yet, but probably before this development, these phases are actually completed.
Again, very quickly in the public art strategy. it's my view that we should give the community a bit of flexibility. So just having steel panels with nice shapes and things on it's maybe not that practical. And people might be looking for seats and things like that could lend themselves well to arts projects along the core path, and that we should consider that when that issue comes up again at this committee. Aside from that, I think that's all. At the end, I'd like to make a statement. But aside from that, I'm happy my questions have been covered. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Law?
Yeah, it was just in regards to the Quality and Fairer Scotland impact assessment, page 35, social and economic disadvantage. Access to affordable and suitable housing is a key issue for those experiencing social and economic disadvantage. The proposal contributes to the overall housing supply, reducing demand pressures and supporting active travel routes, helps to address socio-economic challenges. Who came up with that and what's that based on? Because I don't think it's based on reality.
So if you're asking who wrote it, I wrote it. Yes. In terms of affordable housing, we can't revisit that issue. So the report made a decision on this. What I will say is that there are talks in the background with social housing providers about potentially delivering something on this site, but we're not at a point where we can share any of the detail there. There are only talks at this moment in time, so you might see even some of the earlier phases revisited and coming back to committee. But at this moment in time, there is no affordable housing. There's no ability to ask for affordable housing through a planning agreement on this site, unfortunately.
So would it better not be maybe rewording that to state that the socio-economic disadvantage that due to previous decisions being taken by the reporter and saying that there wasn't a need for affordable housing, that should maybe be put in there, because I think we're well aware and the data now shows that there is a need for that. However, the decision has previously been made that it wasn't to be there. I just think for the public reading that document, it then doesn't come across maybe in the clearest light as to the reality of the situation that people are facing in Clackmannanshire trying to get a house.
So I may have to bring in legal at some point, but in terms of, I do feel there is an advantage of additional homes overall. So people are struggling to get homes, whether or not they're working, needing affordable housing or rented accommodation. So these properties will help in terms of alleviating some of the problem, not all of it, but potentially you will have people moving out of rented accommodation or affordable houses into these, moving up the property ladder, freeing up those properties. I don't know if Rona or Lee wanted to say anything about the risk assessment.
So I'm not sure I've got much more to add than what Jacob has already done. We have to look at it on a project-to-project basis. We know what the decision of the reporter was. There are a number of reasons around that reporter decision. I'm kind of happy to have a chat with you afterwards in relation to that. I think that, what the EQIA is saying is, in terms of this project, it is providing, sorry, this phase, it is providing what it's required to do. But I understand the point that you're making. I'm not sure that we can actually put that down, though, in terms of the actual report.
So we're just wondering if we can make it clearer for the public, because, the perception is there should be housing there, but we can't do that because this will get maybe reported in local newspapers. And again, people believe there's no social housing, but I think it is important for clarity and not being jargony, just to state that it was a decision previously made And that's why we can't change it right here, right now. Because the facts or the information they had at that time did not show that there was a requirement. But however, we are going forward with look at it. I don't know if we can do that, but I just think it's just a wee bit more clear to, because yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and there's maybe something that me and Jacob can have a conversation around. I'm not sure if we can. We need to check the legals on it, but there's maybe something we can put in there. But let me have a look at that, and I can feed back to the committee on that point.
I mean, if you want total clarity on it, a statement along the lines of the Scottish Government reporter did not require any affordable housing to be included. However, this development does contribute to the total mass of housing, thereby making it possible for people to, as Jacob was saying, move up the property ladder, creating space at the bottom. Can some contributed positive, but I don't know if it's going to significantly alter the public impact of this. That one point, I take your point, but I'm not sure it's got weight, really. Okay. Have another about it. I had any further questions from other members? I had one I wanted to ask. I just find it. Yeah, open space and play provision, condition 6, I think that is. Yeah, it just says, right. And if talking about plans that have been submitted to, until plans have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority, I just wondered, has that been done?
No, it's not. So that's a condition of this MSC. What I would say is, Mark did mention it in his presentation, that paragraph 3.55 is not correct. So originally the multi-use games area was proposed for phase 3. It's been moved lower down into some of the later phases, closer to the school. So we will have to make that amendment to the report, just for record. But no, that is a condition that will need to be met separately.
Thanks for that.
Can I just clarify possible school area, because we've not confirmed this. Just for the record.
Yes, that's correct. So it's a possible school annex, and yeah, the council is still looking at whether or not they need that school annex.
Right. This is really nothing to do with planning. This personal query on environmental health section. You're advised that where possible, vehicles must be fitted with white noise reversing alarms. What is that? What's a white noise reversing alarm?
It doesn't go beep, 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 it goes those ones are white noise.
A whole lot better.
As far as I'm aware.
Right, okay, fine. And is it deemed to have less penetration distance-wise? Because a higher frequency rather than a low frequency sound.
I assume so, but I'm not an expert, but I would assume it carries less, yeah.
Yeah, fine. That's a lot.
It just occurred to me just when you said that about the noise. Is there any condition that we can put on to stop properties putting in those systems that make that loud sound? I think it's to stop cats going to the toilet. It doesn't work. It really affects young people and people who have sensitive hearing and people who have autism. It doesn't make it a nice place to walk about when you hear those noises. Is there any condition that we can put in to not have that, or would that have had to go under the whole main master plan one? It just occurred to me just when you said it just now.
The short answer is no, you couldn't condition something like that because you wouldn't need to have permission to do it in the first place. So it wouldn't be development. as we define it. I know the little green box things. Yeah, my neighbours have them got the 2 cats. I know what you mean. No, you don't need planning permission to do that because it's not development, put it there.
Okay, thanks. Lee.
So you can't cover it off in terms of planning. However, on the basis that the agent is actually here as well, you can cover it off under what I said before, the deed of conditions. So there is standard practice that you would put within your deed of conditions, as I said, all the things that basically you're supposed to do as an owner of a property, and that could include provisions around the noise that you're talking about, which could make it, you know, they're not allowed to put them in. That means then the neighbours would be able to deal with the enforcement of that. So it might be something that the agent can maybe take on board, take it back to the developers in terms of that deed of conditions.
So it's not something we have a voice in at all?
No.
No. Okay. Right. Any further questions? Okay, in that case, I will formally propose the paper, looking for a seconder. Councillor Balsillie, thanks very much. Do we wish to debate the paper? I think you do, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. This is phase 1B, and there are going to be subsequent phases. I think what I think is quite interesting about this is that because of the scale of this overall development, it has been developed in certain phases, and I think this is the first time Persimmon Homes have actually operated within Clackmannanshire, to my knowledge. It may have been they may have operated a while ago, but in terms of recent development and housing's evolving, and indeed how planning committees look at housing applications as well. So I found it quite interesting that we were starting to get into the nuts and bolts of the landscape plan, for instance, because that's always, in my experience, been an afterthought. And as a consequence, I think Councillor Law's been a champion in this. It's a consequence when you look at some of our current developments, you've got changes in level that have led to the long-term destruction of mature trees, mature oak trees, bonding of trees, ineffective arrangements with the hinterland, the boundaries in this particular site, I think, and I'm not singling out Persimmon Homes, but the shelter belt along the high ridge is an important landscape feature, both for the setting of this development and long term in terms of its screening. So, in picking up some of Mark's comments about, well, leaving it to the landscape architect, I don't know if I've that same faith in the landscape profession. I think they've got a great job, but all too often they're short term and not thinking about the long term impact. And I wonder whether we ought to ask for a design statement along with the plan that outlines and we do get to the species, but I kind of guess that most of the trees that are going into the front gardens there are going to be cherry trees, and there's probably very little thought given to native oak trees. And I'd like to see a formal statement as to, you know, are we creating avenue trees? It's interesting the way all of us picked out the blue dots initially, and it's thinking, oh, they're going to be the significant such trees are landscape trees, and yet as was highlighted, they were actually the bird boxes, which is great. Bird boxes and the insect hives and houses as well, which is how these landscape plans are evolving. But it would be nice to see a landscape statement along with it. But just to conclude, I welcome Persimmon Homes to Clackmannanshire, and as promised, if we've got reps in the audience, I'd be very keen to work with them to maybe prepare a booklet or something on their site, Welcome to Clackmannanshire, because we've got so much to offer now really in terms of our heritage and culture, our local facilities, and we're building a brand new wellbeing centre, new swimming pool. And all too often, in my experience, and that particularly in some of our new developments, people just move into the area and they're just treated like dormitory towns, and they don't really, it takes them quite a long while to integrate into our ways in Clackmannanshire, knowing what facilities are locally. So I welcome to Clackmannanshire piece, although it's not part of planning. I'd like to reach out as Provost and say, look, I'd be quite happy to work with the developer on that as we start developing these phases for this development. And of course, as a council, we have the fundamental challenges of providing schooling for the residents that move in. Society's moving on. We need to think more imaginatively about which Jacob's reassured me a little bit there about electricity charge points. I'm less convinced as to whether we've got our recycling act together. I think as any of us, as we move through our community, see our multi-bins and all sorts of positions and orientation, and I feel we want to work with developers to try and regulate that a little bit better and control it and make it more aesthetically pleasing. So that's me concluding that, Chair, and I thank Persimmon Homes for putting forward their application and taking an interest in Clackmannanshire.
Thank you, Councillor. You have Provost privilege to expand upon these things. Very welcome. The debate stage is to first a state opinion on the merits or demerits of the paper. So is anyone else wish to contribute to the merits and demerits of the paper? A consideration thereof? No. In that case, by a show of hands, can I ask whether we accept the paper? Yes. I think that's unanimous around the table. Thank you very much for your time and your trouble. And we will convene at another occasion to discuss the next phase.